My name is Ava Miller, and I'm 18 years old. My world, for the most part, is the sprawling, slightly rundown campus of Crestwood Community College. It's a place of mismatched brick buildings, lawns that are more mud than grass in the spring, and a student center that always smells faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant. I'm an art student, which means my real world is the third floor of the Arts and Humanities building. It's a chaotic sanctuary of paint-splattered floors, the sharp scent of turpentine, and the constant, quiet scratching of charcoal on paper. This was my bubble, my safe space. I wasn't the most popular girl, not by a long shot. I was the quiet one, the observer, the one who preferred spending lunch sketching in her notebook instead of navigating the loud, complicated social hierarchies of the cafeteria. I had my small circle of friends, mostly other art kids, and we were happy in our little corner of the universe. My life was predictable, calm, and I liked it that way. Everything changed the day I met George Peterson. He was older, 20, which at that age feels like a whole different generation. He wasn't in any of my art classes. He was a business major, someone I never would have crossed paths with normally. But one afternoon, I was struggling to carry a massive canvas and a box of supplies out to my car, doing that awkward shuffle walk thing, and he just appeared. He had this easy smile and kind eyes, and he didn't even ask. He just gently took the canvas from me and said, "Looks like you could use an extra pair of hands." I was so flustered I could barely stammer out a thank you. He walked me all the way to my beat-up sedan in the far corner of the parking lot, asking me about my art, seeming genuinely interested. He wasn't like the boys my age, who were all awkward energy and jokes that didn't land. George was calm, confident. He seemed adult. We started talking after that. He would find me in the student center between classes or text me late at night. The conversations were intoxicating. He made me feel seen, interesting. He'd call me his little artist and tell me I had an old soul. Looking back, I see all the red flags waving like giant crimson banners in a hurricane, but at 17, they just looked like signs that he really, truly liked me. He was fascinated by the fact that I was still in high school, technically, just taking college courses. He made it seem exotic. The biggest sign, the one that should have sent me running for the hills, was the countdown. My 18th birthday was a few months away, and he made a huge deal out of it. He literally had a countdown app on his phone. At the time, I thought it was romantic, sweepingly so. He would text me things like, "Only 63 days until I can properly take you on a date," or 41 days until you're officially mine. It felt like I was the star of my own movie, the object of this intense, focused affection from an older, sophisticated man. My friends were a little weirded out by it, especially my best friend Mia. She'd wrinkle her nose and say, "It's a little creepy, Ava. Why can't he just be your friend until then?" But I brushed her off. I told her she just didn't understand. I was floating on a cloud of validation and promises. He talked about all the things we would do: weekend trips to the city, fancy dinners, meeting his family. He was building this entire future for us, a future that was set to begin at the stroke of midnight on my birthday. He was my world. He was the first thing I thought about when I woke up and the last voice I wanted to hear before I fell asleep. The problem, the one that shattered my entire existence, arrived via text message. It was 2 days before my 18th birthday, 2 days. The countdown was almost over. I was practically vibrating with excitement. I had the perfect outfit picked out for our first official date. I was in my bedroom, listening to music and imagining how the night would go when my phone buzzed. It was him. I smiled, expecting another sweet message about how he couldn't wait. Instead, the words on the screen felt like a punch to the gut. "Hey, I don't think this is going to work out. You remind me too much of my ex and I can't do it. Sorry." That was it. No phone call, no explanation. Just a cold, dismissive text that detonated my entire world. Sorry. The word just hung there, a pathetic, insulting little excuse. Reminded him of his ex. After months of telling me how unique I was, how he'd never met anyone like me. It was a lie, and a lazy one at that. I sat there on my bed, staring at the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. The music was still playing, a cheerful pop song that suddenly sounded mocking and cruel. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to put my head between my knees. It wasn't just sadness. It was a deep, gut-wrenching humiliation. He hadn't just broken up with me. He had made me wait, made me the centerpiece of this grand, public countdown, only to discard me at the last possible second. I was a project he got bored of, an item on a to-do list he decided to cross off before he even started. The problem wasn't just a broken heart. It was the crushing realization that I had been a fool, and that my supposed fairy tale was just a weird, predatory game to him. My nemesis wasn't just a guy who dumped me. He was George Peterson, the man who had meticulously built me up just to enjoy the spectacle of my fall. The first thing I did was cry. I cried for hours, ugly, snotty sobs that left me dehydrated and exhausted. Then I did what any heartbroken teenage girl would do. I told my friends. I called Mia, my voice thick and shaky, and told her everything. She was furious on my behalf, spewing a string of curses about George that made me feel a tiny bit better. My other friends in our art group rallied around me too, bringing me ice cream and letting me vent for hours. They all agreed his behavior was beyond weird. It was what Mia called non-sai, a British slang term for predatory that felt sickeningly accurate. My first attempt at solving the problem was simply to survive. I had to go back to campus, to the place where he was. I decided on a strategy of cold, polite civility. I wouldn't let him see how much he had hurt me. If I saw him in the crowded hallways or the student center, I would give a small, tight-lipped smile and a nod and keep walking. I thought this was the mature way to handle it, to show him that I was fine, that I was moving on. But this was where things started to get worse. George, it turned out, didn't like my version of events. He had his own circle of friends, a group of business and sports guys who saw him as this cool, older mentor figure. Soon, I started hearing whispers. People were saying I was obsessed with him, that I was a crazy ex who couldn't let go. Apparently, my version of events, the truth was being twisted. In his narrative, I was the one who had come on too strong, and he had let me down gently. My polite nods in the hallway were now being painted as desperate attempts to get his attention. The fact that I had told my friends what he did was framed as me gossiping and spreading rumors to ruin his reputation. It was maddening. I was being gaslighted on a campus-wide scale. Friends of his would give me dirty looks. A girl I barely knew from a sociology class came up to me and told me I should leave George alone. I felt like I was losing my mind. I was the victim, yet I was being made to feel like the villain. The problem was growing, mutating from a personal heartbreak into a public relations nightmare I was completely unprepared for. He was controlling the story, and I was losing. The situation escalated until it reached a terrifying, soul-crushing low. I was trying my best to just put my head down, focus on my art, and wait for the semester to end. I was trying to rebuild my little world. One Tuesday afternoon, I met Mia for coffee at the Daily Grind, our favorite off-campus spot. We were trying to have a normal afternoon, talking about a difficult painting I was working on and her struggles with a history paper. The cafe was warm and smelled of cinnamon and roasted coffee beans. For a moment, I felt normal. Then Mia's face changed. She was scrolling through her phone, and her expression went from relaxed to horrified. "Ava," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You need to see this." My stomach clenched. "What is it?" She hesitated, biting her lip. It's from George. He's in a group chat with some of his buddies. One of the guys in it is my cousin's friend, and he sent it to her because he thought it was disgusting. She just forwarded it to me. She turned her phone around. It wasn't a text message. It was a voice note, a long one. My heart started pounding in my ears. With a trembling finger, I pressed play. George's voice filled the space between us, the same voice that used to tell me I was special, but the words were monstrous. He was laughing with his friends, talking about me. He called me an immature brat, a child who throws tantrums. That part stung, but it was what came next that made the blood drain from my face. In a leering, predatory tone, he described in graphic detail what he thought should be done to me. The words were violent and deeply sexual. He said I should be pinned against a wall, and he used a vulgar, horrific phrase that I can't even bring myself to repeat. It was about physical and sexual degradation. He was laughing as he said it. His friends were laughing with him. The world around me seemed to tilt on its axis. The cheerful chatter of the cafe, the clinking of cups, it all faded into a dull roar. The coffee in my cup suddenly seemed like poison. This wasn't a guy with a broken heart lashing out. This wasn't a simple breakup. This was a man who saw me as an object, a thing to be used and discarded and then mocked with a chilling, violent glee. The countdown, the sweet words, the promises, it was all a lie, a performance to get what he wanted. And when he didn't, this was who he really was. This was my rock bottom. I was no longer just heartbroken or humiliated. I was scared. I felt violated, dirty, and utterly powerless. I had tried to handle it with grace, and this was my reward. He hadn't just made my problem worse. He had revealed the problem to be a monster I couldn't have even imagined. All I had left was this recording, this piece of digital proof of his true nature, and a rage that was starting to burn away the fear. The immediate aftermath of hearing that voice note was a blur of righteous fury. Mia and I sat in the coffee shop, both of us shaking. She was pale, her eyes wide with disgust. "Ava, this is not okay. This is more than just him being a jerk. This is something else." I couldn't speak for a full minute. I just kept replaying his words in my head, the casual cruelty, the laughter. The image of him, with his easy smile and kind eyes, was now superimposed with this vile, ugly persona. It was like seeing a monster take off its human mask. My fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but something else was growing alongside it, a hard, sharp-edged resolve. He was not going to get away with this. He was not going to reduce me to a punchline in his disgusting group chat and then walk around campus like a king. The first step was small but crucial. I forwarded the voice note to my closest friends, the ones in my art group. Their reactions were swift and absolute. There was no more talk of being the bigger person. There was only shock and a shared sense of protective anger. They saw him for what he was. The next day at college, the atmosphere had shifted. My friends, now armed with the truth, didn't hide their contempt. When George walked past our usual table in the student center, instead of polite nods, he was met with icy glares. He tried his usual charming smile, but it faltered when no one returned it. He looked confused, then annoyed. Later that day, Mia got a frantic series of texts from him. "Why is everyone acting so weird around me? Did you say something?" Mia, who is much braver than I am, didn't hesitate. Wrote back, "Everyone knows what you said about Ava." He immediately went into denial mode. What? I didn't say anything. She's spreading lies about me. I told you she was crazy. This was his chance to apologize, to show a sliver of remorse. He didn't take it, so Mia did something beautiful. She simply sent him the voice note file. No commentary, no explanation, just the recording of his own voice, his own vile words. The response was instantaneous. He called her, screaming and crying. He wasn't sorry for what he'd said. He was terrified of being caught. He wailed about how his life was being ruined, how he was losing all his friends. He demanded to know who had leaked it, spitting with rage. He was a cornered animal, pathetic and vicious. The next logical step was to go to the school authorities. Mia and I went to the safeguarding office, a small, stuffy room with posters about wellness and safety on the walls. We sat across from a woman with a kind but tired face and explained everything. I played the voice note for her. Her expression remained neutral, but I saw a flicker of horror in her eyes. She took copious notes, asked a lot of questions, and assured us that this was a serious matter and that they would be launching a full investigation. We left her office feeling a small sense of victory, but it was hollow. The wheels of bureaucracy turned slowly. An investigation could take weeks, months. Meantime, he was still a student. He was still walking the same halls I was. A few days passed and nothing seemed to happen. I saw him on campus once from a distance. He was alone, head down, scurrying between buildings. He looked miserable, and a part of me was satisfied, but it wasn't enough. The system might punish him eventually, but the system wouldn't undo the social damage he had done to me. The system wouldn't erase the whispers or the dirty looks. The official channels felt inadequate. They would handle the threat maybe, but they wouldn't restore my dignity. That's when the idea began to form. It started as a flicker of a thought late one night as I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram. I landed on his profile. It was public. There he was, smiling in photos with his friends, posing at parties, projecting this image of a popular, happy-go-lucky guy. And below each photo were dozens, sometimes hundreds of followers. Friends, acquaintances, family members, people from his hometown, girls who probably thought he was charming. They didn't know. They saw the mask, not the monster. They were seeing the story he wanted them to see. And I realized in a sudden, clarifying flash that the power to change that was right at my fingertips. The safeguarding office could suspend him, but I could do something they couldn't. I could destroy the lie. I could make sure everyone saw the real George Peterson. This was my last-ditch effort, the final act. It wasn't about getting him in trouble with the school anymore. It was about taking back the narrative, about burning his carefully constructed social world to the ground. This was going to be my climax. I was going to fight back not with whispers and rumors, but with cold, hard proof. I opened my laptop, my heart hammering with a mixture of terror and exhilarating purpose. The final attempt to solve my problem had begun. The plan was a product of pure, unadulterated rage, honed by the precision of an artist. It was digital warfare, and I was about to launch a surgical strike. My hands were shaking, but my mind was crystal clear. First, I needed an alias, a new identity. I couldn't do this as Ava Miller. I created a new Instagram account. I needed a name that sounded real, friendly, and completely unremarkable. I settled on Amber Riley. I found a generic but pretty profile picture online, a stock photo of a girl with her back to the camera looking out at a sunset. It was anonymous but aesthetically pleasing. Amber Riley was born. The next phase was the most tedious and nerve-wracking. I went to George's Instagram profile and started the painstaking process of following every single one of his followers. There were over 800 of them. I spent hours clicking follow, my thumb aching. With each click, my resolve hardened. These were the people who formed his world, his audience. They were about to get a front row seat to the real show. Many of them, mostly girls his age or younger, followed Amber Riley back, probably out of curiosity. My new, fake account was slowly gaining legitimacy. The final piece of preparation was crafting the message. I couldn't just drop the voice note without context. I needed to control the narrative completely. I opened a new document and typed out a short, clear explanation. I wrote it from a third-person perspective, as if Amber was a concerned friend. I am sharing this because I think everyone deserves to know the kind of person George Peterson really is, I wrote. This is how he talks about young women, specifically an 18-year-old student at his college, behind their backs. Please listen to this. I transcribed the most vile parts of the voice note, so the words were right there on the screen, impossible to ignore. I didn't want anyone to be able to claim they couldn't understand the audio. There would be no ambiguity. Once my new account had a decent number of followers, it was time. This was the moment of climax. It was almost midnight. I was sitting in the dark in my room, the only light coming from my phone's screen. I created a new group chat on Instagram. The feature allows you to add a large number of people. One by one, I began adding every single person who followed George and who had followed me back. His friends, his family members whose accounts I could find, his ex-girlfriends, the random girls from our college who thought he was cute. The list grew and grew until there were hundreds of people in one massive group chat. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was it. There was no going back. I took a deep breath, my finger hovering over the screen. I pasted the text I had written. Then I attached the audio file of the voice note. I looked at the message one last time. It was a digital bomb and I was about to detonate it. I hit send. For a few seconds, there was absolute silence. Nothing happened. I felt a pang of anticlimax, a sudden fear that it hadn't worked, that no one would see it. And then my phone exploded. Notifications began to flood in so fast my screen couldn't keep up. The banner notifications at the top of my phone became a continuous strobing waterfall. So-and-so left the conversation. So-and-so left the conversation. Dozens, then hundreds of people were exiting the group chat in a mass exodus, but in between there were other messages. Oh my God, that's disgusting. Is this real? I knew he was a creep. A few of his die-hard friends tried to defend him. This is fake. One wrote, "You're all pathetic for believing this." But their voices were drowned out. Someone who clearly knew him well wrote, "That's definitely his voice. I'd recognize that stupid laugh anywhere." The confrontation was happening right there in a massive, chaotic group chat. His entire social life was imploding in real time, and I was the anonymous catalyst. After about 10 minutes of pure chaos, I deactivated the Amber Riley account. It had served its purpose. I threw my phone onto my bed and just breathed, my body trembling with adrenaline. The consequence of my action was poetic in its totality. The next day I went to college, and for the first time in months, I felt light, I felt safe. I walked through the student center and didn't even have to look for him. He wasn't there, he was gone. Mia updated me later. Apparently, the fallout was catastrophic. His phone had been blowing up all night from angry and disgusted friends and family. The few friends who tried to defend him were shouted down. He had been completely and utterly excommunicated. He dropped all his classes and withdrew from Crestwood Community College. I never saw George Peterson again. He had vanished, erased from my world as completely as if he had never existed. The resolution was quieter than the climax, but far more profound. My new normal was my old normal, but better. The whispers and the dirty looks were gone. People who had been cold to me before now gave me looks of sympathy, some even apologized. I had not only cleared my name, I had taken control of my own story and ended it on my terms. I wasn't the crazy ex anymore. I was the girl who had fought back and won. I was no longer the shy, uncertain girl who was flattered by the attention of an older guy. I had been forged in the fire of humiliation and rage, and I had come out stronger, harder, and infinitely more aware of my own power. My art changed, too. For my final project that semester, I created a series of portraits, but instead of painting faces, I painted masks, intricate, beautiful masks that people wore to hide the ugliness underneath. The centerpiece was a self-portrait. It was just me, from the shoulders up, looking directly at the viewer. I wasn't smiling. My expression was calm, steady, and unflinching, and in my hand I was holding a shattered porcelain mask, its once charming smile now just a collection of sharp, dangerous fragments. I didn't need a mask anymore. I had learned that my real face, the one that had seen the worst and survived, was more powerful than any disguise.